As part of CoinDesk's Privacy Week, we're publishing a deep dive into privacy coin Monero, a shining beacon for privacy advocates that often attracts scrutiny from regulators for ignoring Know Your Customer anti-money laundering procedures. Joining us now is Grid News tech reporter Benjamin Powers. Welcome, Ben. So you published an article with us. Tell us a bit about Monero. How popular is it, and how is it being used today?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of different things to consider, particularly when it looks at Monero, but also anonymity-enhancing currencies more generally. That's sort of the moniker that they prefer to go under rather than pure privacy coins. But Monero's, seen a pretty substantial but also level volume of transactions. And that's not really increased a ton over a course of time, though people are using it. And I think what's important is it certainly does attract a lot of scrutiny. A lot of AECs do, but there are reasons that people want financial privacy. It could be a myriad of them, but that's really not something that should be frowned upon. People want privacy. They want to be thinking about how their networks or how their transactions are being surveilled, what that can tell authorities about them. And just generally, they want to keep their data to themselves. And so that's certainly worthwhile when considering that my cat is here with us. I'm going to put her down. Why people might be using it. And I think it's particularly important to recognize during Privacy Week itself.
Ben, so nice to see you back on CoinDesk TV. So I guess the question is, though, do coins like Monero really stand a chance in this regulatory environment? Because one of the things we've seen happening with Bitcoin is just increasing levels of KYC to the point where sometimes it feels like you're just opening another bank account. Can Monero and other coins like that really survive as regulators are turning their scrutiny toward cryptocurrencies, especially ones that prioritize anonymous transactions?
I think they can certainly survive. I mean, that's the whole point of these decentralized networks. But I think the really thing that you need to you pay attention to is it's going to be harder to off-ramp into fiat for this. And so if that's something that people need to do or a network needs to do, then that's going to become increasingly difficult. It's going to be hard to, pull it out in cash itself. But if you want to keep it in Monero, I think that's increasingly viable. And I think that, there's a bunch of different services that are looking to provide better privacy. I think a misnomer kind of, in previous years was that Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies is synonymous with privacy. And that's just not the case, particularly amongst the ways that, various sort of blockchain analysis companies have, kind of cashed in on the ability to track all these transactions, everything else. So where there's a market or a demand for this, there's going to be a market. And I think that it's going to be increasingly the case where these markets are sustainable. But yeah, the off-ramping to me is going to be the one that's tricky.
So Ben, quickly, you wrote a whole article about Monero. Why did you choose Monero specifically? What's special about it compared to other anonymous prioritizing coins like Zcash or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this, it's kind of a one piece in a set of series looking at a variety of privacy coins. And there are a few kind of big ones out there, and Zcash is one, Monero is another, but Monero is really kind of seeing, large traffic volumes comparable to other privacy coins, and it, is kind of baked in private by design, and that's important. There's, kind of not a way to toggle on and off how public you want to make it, but it is tricky, and there are ways to, break that privacy in a certain sense. So it's important when using any kind of AEC to focus on the fact that there's steps that you have to take on your end to ensure that is the case. It's really difficult to find any privacy coin that's just kind of plug and play and gets, right at the heart of privacy on chain.
So Ben, likewise, welcome back. One question though is, what do we know about the users of Monero? What do we know about? We know something a little bit about its creators, but what do we know about the people who are actually going on Monero, taking it and doing transactions? Do we know anything about them that we can glean either from the data or just from anecdote or what have you?
I think it's more anecdotal. There are ways that you can look at some of the data and see who the users are, but that's the point of this, right? Is that you're not able to tell exactly who's who and where this money is flowing. There are commercial uses for this. When I was at CoinDesk, I covered some of the marketplaces where, you can pay with Bitcoin, you can pay with ETH, you can pay with Monero, you can pay with other stuff. And so there is a way that it could be used for consumer goods and things like that. But otherwise, it is sometimes tricky to tell exactly what the users are. And, certainly there are probably people who maybe engage in less savory practices that use it, but that's the same really for anything. And I think that's important to recognize. All of these coins and cryptocurrencies more generally, they are narrow tools that perform specific functions for individuals. And there's obviously now a suite of them to choose from. And so painting, one whole segment of coins with a broad brush, I think is really problematic, only in the sense that it takes away from, okay, how can we actually use these things and what are they useful for? Because not one of them, not any of them is a panacea for all the issues that we face, particularly around privacy.
So the IRS tried to pay out somebody if they could hack into Monero. What happened there, and did they succeed?
So I can't speak specifically to that. I don't know how that turned up, but what I think is important is that, sort of putting out a bug bounty or whatever the equivalent would be to try and hack Monero shows the IRS is interested in this. I also just want to call attention to, beyond financial privacy, right? The IRS is also looking at integrating with a third party this summer that if you want to pay your taxes online, some people are going to be asked to submit biometric evidence that they are themselves in some ways. So that includes selfie videos and stuff like that using facial recognition. So, the IRS is they have a lot of different things on their plate right now, that particularly when it comes to compromising privacy and providing identity around individuals. But that bug bounty really shows the interest level they have in cracking this, just so they can make sure, that people are in fact paying their taxes.
Well, in terms of news cycles, when we hear about Monero, we often hear about it in the context of it's a preferred coin among hackers and ransomware attackers. They give a discount on ransoms if it's paid in XMR, so that's always interesting. But today we're seeing the crypto markets plunge, and Monero was plummeting about 30% over the past week, following the descent of the rest of the crypto market. So, but what can you tell us about Monero's price? And I understand they have unlimited supply. I wonder how that is governed.
So I am certainly not a market watcher. In fact, I make a point not to really watch markets. I think the really interesting stuff in crypto isn't the price points, but it's the tech, things like zero knowledge proofs, privacy coins like Monero, all this stuff that's kind of trickling out into more mainstream financial transactions. And that to me is the really interesting stuff that's happened. So I'm not going to comment on the price, but I also will say that the vast majority of high level ransomware attacks that we're seeing, one, they aren't going away. B, a lot of them are trying to be paid out in Bitcoin for the most part, because that is the most valuable. And that is in some ways the easiest to off ramp, as I was speaking to earlier. So, just no price comments for me. That's not the role I play, but I will say that, it's going to continue to have utility, as a lot of these things will in these narrow cases.